When Ashley Braxton finally opened her mouth and told her truth, it didn't just rattle the family, it shook the Braxton name to its very core. For years, Ashley Braxton was treated like the niece in the shadows, the quiet one who stayed out of the spotlight, who never pushed to be on camera, who avoided the noise and chaos that seemed to follow the Braxton sisters everywhere they went. She didn't want fame, she didn't want drama, and she certainly didn't want to be a storyline. But when Ashley Braxton decided she couldn't carry her silence anymore, the result was an earthquake that split the Braxton legacy right down the middle. Her words weren't polished, they weren't delivered for TV ratings. They were raw, trembling, and drenched in pain. Once her story spread online, the image of the Braxton family changed forever. They no longer looked like a dynasty of harmony and talent. They looked like a family cracking in front of the entire world. At the center of the storm was Tamar Braxton, the sister who has always been the lightning rod of the family, the one who never feared controversy, the one who lived her entire life on the edge of fire. Tamar Braxton had endured divorces, breakups, explosive fights, and humiliating breakdowns in front of cameras, yet she always found her way back up. And when Ashley Braxton shared her truth, Tamar Braxton saw herself. She recognized the shame that eats you alive, the helplessness when people dismiss your pain, and the silence forced on you when protecting the family image becomes more important than protecting your heart. So she did what only Tamar Braxton could do. She spoke up, loud and unfiltered. She praised Ashley Braxton for her bravery, calling her courageous. She told the world no one had the right to silence her. And she repeated her words with a fire that could not be ignored. That's that on that. Nobody's gonna stop her, me, or anybody else from living in their truth. Period. The internet exploded the second Tamar Braxton spoke. Within hours, hashtags like Sharks Stand With Ashley and Tamar Speaks Truth were trending across Twitter and Instagram. Fans praised Tamar Braxton for refusing to bury family secrets, for standing up for survivors, for being unapologetically real. They said she was the only one with the courage to do what the rest of the family wouldn't. But as always, the backlash came just as hard. Critics accused Tamar Braxton of using Ashley Braxton's pain for attention, of dragging the family name through the mud, of feeding chaos instead of healing. The fandom split straight down the middle, Team Tamar or Team Silence, and the war only grew louder by the hour. Behind the cameras, the tension was unbearable. Season 2 of The Braxtons was already filming, but instead of the usual mix of shade and laughter, production found itself in the middle of a civil war. Towanda Braxton and Trina Braxton confronted Tamar Braxton, demanding she back down and cancel her upcoming podcast with Ashley Braxton. They told her family loyalty had to come first. But Tamar Braxton wasn't folding. She waved the cease and desist letter she had already received, proof that the family's lawyers were trying to silence her, and she made it clear she wasn't intimidated. She said legal threats couldn't erase the truth, and she wasn't about to let her niece be buried for the sake of protecting the Braxton brand. For the first time in years, the cameras weren't just filming reality TV, they were filming the collapse of an empire. Producers panicked, sponsors got nervous, lawyers hovered in the background, but the Braxton sisters refused to calm down. And fans started whispering about the one sister who had not yet spoken, Toni Braxton. For decades, Toni Braxton was the face of poise and dignity, the sister who stayed classy and composed while the others spun out in chaos. Fans believed if anyone could bring peace, it was Toni Braxton. She had always been the balance, the voice of reason, the one who could soothe tempers and steer her family back on track. Surely, they thought, Toni Braxton would stand with Tamar Braxton and protect Ashley Braxton. Surely she would value healing over hiding. Surely she would not betray her own blood. But whispers began to tell a different story. Whispers suggested Toni Braxton was tired of the noise. Whispers said she was fed up with secrets being dragged into the public. Whispers claimed Toni Braxton wasn't going to defend Tamar Braxton at all. She was going to side with the sisters who wanted silence. And then the whispers were confirmed. Through leaked texts, insider whispers, and subtle moves, it became clear. Toni Braxton was not standing with Tamar Braxton or Ashley Braxton. She had chosen to align herself with Towanda Braxton and Trina Braxton, putting the Braxton brand above her own sister. The betrayal was explosive. Fans gasped, blogs went wild, and the internet lit up in shock. How could Toni Braxton, the woman who built her career on songs about survival and heartbreak, choose silence and reputation over protecting her niece? On set, the fallout was instant. Towanda Braxton and Trina Braxton rallied behind Toni Braxton, circling her like a shield and framing Tamar Braxton as reckless. Voices rose to a breaking point until producers feared the show would collapse. Then came the moment no one expected. Toni Braxton, the calm one, the quiet one, suddenly erupted. She raised her voice and shouted that she would not let Tamar Braxton drag the family name through the mud, that the podcast was reckless, and that she was destroying everything they had built. The silence that followed was chilling. Crew members froze. The sisters stared in disbelief. No one had ever seen Toni Braxton snap like that, but Tamar Braxton didn't back down. She fired back, calling her sister a coward, accusing her of betrayal, demanding to know how she could put money over blood, how she could sleep at night while silencing Ashley Braxton. Cameras captured every second of the fiery exchange, every tear, every slam of fists against tables. It was too raw, too painful, too real. Meanwhile, the whispers about Toni Braxton's finances wouldn't stop. Rumors of foreclosure, whispers about Birdman's financial troubles, speculation that desperation, not dignity, was driving her choices. Fans began to question whether Toni Braxton was protecting the family or protecting her own survival. The irony was brutal. The sister seen as stable and classy now looked cornered and desperate, while the one always branded messy, Tamar Braxton, was standing as the voice of truth. The internet turned into a battlefield. Hashtag split the fandom, Sheeman Team Toni, Team Tamar, Team Ashley. Comment sections became war zones, each side defending their chosen truth. But inside the family, the fracture was permanent. Towanda Braxton and Trina Braxton clung to Toni Braxton, while Tamar Braxton stood alone with Ashley Braxton, refusing to back down. And then came the whispers that another family member was preparing to speak. Another Braxton with their own story, their own truth, their own bomb ready to drop. The internet froze, waiting for the next explosion. The moment Toni Braxton made it clear that she wasn't standing beside Tamar Braxton or Ashley Braxton, the family split turned into something deeper than just a disagreement. It became betrayal that everyone could feel in the air. Tamar Braxton carried the sting in her chest every time she walked onto set. She would hold her head high, but behind her eyes was a storm that never calmed down. Ashley Braxton wasn't even in most of the filming, yet somehow her name, her pain, and her silence echoed in every room. The whole family dynamic shifted. It was no longer about rehearsals or sister banter for TV. It was about who was brave enough to stand with the truth and who was willing to bury it for the sake of protecting the Braxton brand. On one side, Tamar Braxton fought with everything she had. She defended Ashley Braxton online. She repeated over and over that her niece had the right to speak, and she refused to let anyone intimidate her into silence. On the other side, Toni Braxton stood tall with Towanda Braxton and Trina Braxton, creating a wall that made it clear they were not going to bend, no matter how much backlash came. To them, the reputation of the Braxton name was more important than letting Ashley Braxton become the center of a scandal. But that stance came with a cost, because the more they tried to protect the brand, the more fans started accusing them of silencing a survivor. Behind the scenes, production was spiraling. Calls from lawyers came almost daily. Sponsors started questioning whether the show was even safe to be attached to anymore. The network feared lawsuits if certain conversations aired, but they also knew if they cut too much, the audience would feel cheated. Everything turned into a gamble. Every scene carried a risk. Every word spoken could become a headline. Tamar Braxton didn't care. She told producers flat out that she wasn't here to play nice, she was here to speak her truth. She said if they cut her, she'd say it online. If they silenced her, she'd buy her own cameras. Nothing and no one was going to stop her from standing with Ashley Braxton. Meanwhile, the tension between Tamar Braxton and Toni Braxton boiled higher than it had ever been in their lives. Fans had always seen them argue, but this wasn't playful shade or normal sister conflict. This was venom, betrayal, and heartbreak. For years, Toni Braxton was the one Tamar Braxton leaned on, the one she respected even when she didn't agree. But now that foundation was gone. Tamar Braxton couldn't believe her sister would rather side with silence than protect their own blood. She looked at Toni Braxton and didn't see the peacemaker anymore. She saw someone who had chosen image over love, and the internet didn't let it rest. Team Tamar and Team Toni kept trending back and forth. Some fans argued Tamar Braxton was reckless, too loud, too messy, always choosing chaos over peace. Others swore she was the only one brave enough to call out the silence that destroys families from within. And in the middle of it all, Ashley Braxton posted cryptic captions, photos of sunsets, words about breaking cycles, lines about finding strength in pain. She never named names, but everyone knew. Every post she made fueled the storm, because silence has power when the world already knows what you're hinting at. On set, it only got worse. The sisters sat down for a filmed conversation where producers begged them to find common ground, but it turned into another explosion. Toni Braxton accused Tamar Braxton of using Ashley Braxton as a pawn. Toni Braxton pleaded for peace, saying there had to be a way to support Ashley Braxton without destroying the family. Tamar Braxton snapped back, saying the only way to support her niece was to stop burying her voice under paperwork and fake smiles. Toni Braxton, cold and collected at first, lost her calm again. She raised her voice, telling Tamar Braxton she was dragging everyone through the mud, risking everything they'd built and turning private wounds into public chaos. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Cameras caught Tamar Braxton shaking her head, caught tears pooling in her eyes but not falling. And then she said the line that went viral everywhere. "If telling the truth makes me the villain, then I'll be the villain." Because villains speak up when heroes hide. Fans reposted it, blogs headlined it, survivors quoted it. That sentence alone split the fandom even further. To some, it was proof that Tamar Braxton was a warrior. To others, it was proof she thrived on drama. But no one could deny it was powerful. Away from cameras, whispers about Toni Braxton's finances got louder. Blogs resurfaced old foreclosure documents. Reports about Birdman's financial struggles started circulating again. Fans speculated maybe that was why Toni Braxton was fighting so hard to keep the family image spotless, because she couldn't afford another scandal. The image of Toni Braxton as the stable, classy sister started to crumble in the eyes of the public. Meanwhile, Tamar Braxton, always called dramatic, always called messy, started to look like the only one truly standing on principle. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. By this point, producers could barely control filming. Sisters walked past each other in hallways without speaking. Group texts went unanswered. Meetings turned into shouting matches. Tamar Braxton stopped trying to play nice for the cameras and instead leaned into her role as the family's outcast. She kept defending Ashley Braxton, telling anyone who would listen that she wasn't going to let her niece be bullied into silence. She connected Ashley Braxton's truth to her own, reminding people of the time she admitted publicly that she too had carried scars from her childhood. She told the world she would rather be hated for standing with her niece than loved for protecting lies. And then the rumors started about another Braxton preparing to speak. Blogs hinted it wasn't just Ashley Braxton anymore. Another family member, someone who had stayed silent for years, was allegedly ready to share their own story. The whispers said there were journals, old voicemails, recordings that had been buried. No one knew exactly who it was, but the threat alone sent shockwaves. If Ashley Braxton's voice could fracture the family this much, what would happen if another voice came forward? That's when fans realized this wasn't just a storyline anymore. This was a dynasty unraveling. The Braxton sisters weren't just disagreeing, they were at war. And for the first time, it wasn't clear if there would ever be a way back. The weeks that followed were unlike anything the Braxton family had ever faced. Tamar Braxton kept fighting, refusing to let the noise bury her niece, while Toni Braxton, Toni Braxton, and Toni Braxton held their ground, insisting that protecting the family image was the only way forward. But the more they tried to keep the brand intact, the more it looked like cracks were spreading everywhere. Ashley Braxton became a symbol she never asked to be. Fans reposted her photos, turned her words into memes, and painted her as the survivor who had exposed the dynasty for what it really was, a fragile family drowning under its own silence. The pressure inside the family reached unbearable levels. Tamar Braxton stopped joining certain group scenes because she said she was tired of being ambushed. Toni Braxton refused to sit in the same green room as her sister, demanding separation in production notes. Toni Braxton worked overtime to spin the narrative into something cleaner, while Toni Braxton tried to play the peacekeeper, but even she admitted in a quiet moment that nothing was working. The Braxtons weren't just filming a show, they were bleeding in real time and the cameras never stopped rolling. Fans could feel it too. Social media was a battlefield every single day. One moment, Nashi Natcher Team Toni would trend with fans defending her decision to protect the family brand. The next moment, Natcher Team Tamar would rise, with people praising her for putting truth above everything else. And in the middle, Ashley Braxton's name stayed constant. Survivors shared their own stories under her hashtags. People flooded her comments with love, and her face became the center of a movement she never tried to lead. For every person defending Toni Braxton's silence, there were 5 more quoting Tamar Braxton's fiery words. Then came the blogs claiming there were recordings, audio tapes, private conversations, even alleged voicemails where certain sisters tried to bury situations in the past. Nobody could confirm if they were real, but the threat was enough to keep the internet buzzing. Rumors swirled that another Braxton relative, possibly someone who had stayed silent for years, was finally ready to step into the light. If that happened, the damage would be irreversible. Production panicked. Lawyers were everywhere. Sponsors threatened to pull out if the chaos didn't slow down. But the cameras kept capturing every scream, every tear, every slammed door. Tamar Braxton refused to stop speaking. She told anyone who would listen that her niece wasn't a liability. She was a human being who deserved to be heard. She reminded the world that family loyalty doesn't mean silencing victims. It means protecting them. And every time she spoke, fans amplified her words until they drowned out the polished statements from the other sisters. Meanwhile, Toni Braxton tried to hold on to her image, but whispers about her finances wouldn't go away. Old foreclosure documents resurfaced, articles about Birdman's money problems circulated again, and people began to say out loud what many had been thinking. That maybe Toni Braxton's decision to stand against Tamar Braxton wasn't about principle at all. It was about survival. Maybe she wasn't protecting the family brand because she wanted dignity. Maybe she needed it to keep herself afloat. And that narrative hit her harder than any rumor ever had, because once fans started seeing her as desperate instead of dignified, her crown of stability cracked. The fights between the sisters got darker. Towanda Braxton accused Tamar Braxton of chasing the spotlight. Tamar Braxton shot back that Towanda Braxton had become nothing but a mouthpiece for lawyers. Trina Braxton begged them to stop, saying the family was tearing itself apart on camera, but her pleas were ignored. Tamar Braxton finally said it plain. If protecting a brand means destroying Ashley, then the brand deserves to die. The words shook the room. Even producers froze. It was the kind of line you don't just say, you mean it. The internet ate it up. That clip went viral in hours. Fans made edits, paired the words with music, and turned it into the quote of the season. To many, it proved Tamar Braxton was the only one with the courage to call out the hypocrisy in her family. To others, it was proof she didn't care if the entire Braxton legacy burned. Either way, it made her the center of the story again. And then came the biggest cliffhanger yet. Late at night, blogs began posting that recordings had surfaced. Real recordings. Supposedly, they captured conversations between Braxton family members, hinting at years of cover-ups, legal threats, and unspoken pain. Whether they were authentic or not didn't even matter. The idea alone was enough to send fans into a frenzy. If those recordings leaked in full, the Braxton name could be destroyed permanently. For Ashley Braxton, it was overwhelming. She never wanted to lead a movement, never wanted to be the reason her family unraveled in front of millions. She just wanted healing, but instead her name had become a war cry. She posted another cryptic message. Truth is heavy, but silence is heavier. And the internet exploded all over again. For Tamar Braxton, it was fuel. She doubled down harder than ever, saying she didn't care if the family turned against her because she wasn't going to let her niece stand alone. For Toni Braxton, it was pressure. She tried to keep her composure, but everyone could see the cracks. And for Towanda Braxton and Trina Braxton, it was survival. They stuck to their side, hoping the storm would pass, but deep down they knew this wasn't just another season of drama. This was their legacy collapsing. By the end of filming, nothing was the same. Sisters who once laughed together now walked past each other without speaking. Contracts hung in the balance. Lawsuits loomed. And fans were left waiting for the next bomb to drop. Would the recordings leak? Would another Braxton relative speak up? Would the family ever find a way to heal? Nobody knew. What everyone did know was this. The Braxton name, once a symbol of harmony and music, was now synonymous with betrayal, division, and secrets. And as much as the sisters wanted to control the narrative, it was already out of their hands. The truth had escaped, and no matter how many letters or lawyers tried to chase it down, it was never going back in the box.